In days to come he contrived to avenge the fall of his prince. He befriended Adgils when Adgils was friendless, aiding his cause with weapons and warriors over the wide sea, sending him men. The feud was settled on a comfortless campaign when he killed Anelia. And so the son of Ecgtheow had survived every extreme, excelling himself in daring and in danger until the day arrived when he had to come face to face with the dragon. The lord of the Geats took 11 comrades and went in a rage to Recontir. By then he had discovered the cause of the affliction. Being visited on the people, the precious cup had come to him from the hand of the finder, the one who had started all this strife, and was now added as a 13th to their number. They press-ganged and compelled this poor creature to be their guide. Against his will, he led them to the earth vault he alone knew, an underground barrow near the sea billows, and heaving waves, heaped inside with exquisite metalwork. The one who stood guard was dangerous and watchful, warden of that trove, buried under earth. No easy bargain would be made in that place by any man. The veteran king sat down on the cliff top. He wished good luck to the Geats who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his own death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his coffered soul, part life from limb. Before long, the prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Many a skirmish I survived when I was young, and many times of war I remember them well. At 7, I was fostered out by my father, left in the charge of my people's lord. King Hrethel kept me and took care of me, was open-handed, behaved like a kinsman, while I was his ward. He treated me no worse as a wean about the place than one of his own boys. Hirbiald and Hethsin, or my own Hygelac. For the eldest, Hirbiald, an unexpected deathbed was laid out, through a brother's doing, when Hæthcyn bent his torn-tipped bow and loosed the arrow that destroyed his life. He shot wide and buried his shaft in the flesh and blood of his own brother. That offense was beyond redress, a wrong footing of the heart's affections. For who could avenge the prince's life or pay his death price? It was like the misery felt by an old man who has lived to see his son's body swing on the gallows. He begins to keen and weep for his boy, watching the raven gloat where he hangs. He can be of no help. The wisdom of age is worthless to him. Morning after morning, he wakes to remember that his child is gone. He has no interest in living on until another heir is born in the hall, now that his firstborn has entered death's dominion forever. He gazes sorrowfully at his son's dwelling. The banquet hall bereft of all delight, the wind-swept hearthstone. The horsemen are sleeping. The warriors underground. What was is no more. No tunes from the harp, no cheer raised in the yard. Alone with his longing, he lies down on his bed and sings a lament. Everything seems too large. The steadings in the fields, such was the feeling of loss endured by the lord of the Geats. After Hirbiald's death, he was hopelessly placed to set to rights the wrong committed, could not punish the killer in accordance of the law of the blood feud, although he felt no love for him. Heart-sore, wearied, he turned away from life's joys, chose God's light, and departed, leaving buildings and lands to his sons, as a man of substance will. Then over the wide seas, Swedes and Geats battled and feuded and fought without quarter. Hostilities broke out when Hrethel died. Ogentheow's sons were unrelenting, refusing to make peace, campaigning violently from coast to coast, constantly setting up terrible ambushes around Hreneshill. My own kith and kin avenged these evil events, as everybody knows, but the price was high. One of them paid with his life. Hæthcyn, lord of the Geats, met his fate there and fell in battle. Then, as I have heard, Hygelac's sword was raised in the morning against Ogentheow, his brother's killer. When Eofor cleft the old Swede's helmet, halved it open, he fell, death pale, his feud calloused hand could not stave off the fatal stroke. The treasures that Hygelac lavished on me I paid for as I fought, as fortune allowed me, with my glittering sword. He gave me land and the security land brings, so he had no call to go looking for some lesser champion, some mercenary among the Grifthas, or the Speardanes, or the men of Sweden. I marched ahead of him, always there at the front of the line, and I shall fight like that for as long as I live, as long as this sword shall last, which has stood me in good stead, late and soon, ever since I killed Dayraven the Frank in front of the two armies. He brought back no looted breastplate to the Frisian king, but fell in battle, their standard-bearer, high-born and brave. No sword blade sent him to his death. My bare hands stilled his heartbeats, and wrecked the bone house. Now blade and hand, sword and sword stroke, will essay the horde. Beowulf spoke, made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life, often when I was young. Now I am old. But as king of this people, I shall pursue this fight for the glory of winning, if the evil one will only abandon his earth fort and face me in the open. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time, those fighters in their helmets, resolute and high-born. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way. To grapple with the dragon and make good my boast, as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes. So I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate. Overseer of men decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against this skyborn foe. Men-at-arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armor, to see which of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me, to measure his strength against the monster, or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away. Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted in his own strength entirely, and went under the crag. No coward path, hard by the rock face, that hale veteran, a good man, who had gone repeatedly into combat and danger and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive, unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Geats unburdened his breast, and broke out in a storm of anger. Under grey stone his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Heat was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. There was a rumble underground. Down there in the barrow, Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield. The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and viciously turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by ancient right, was already in his hand. Roused to a fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing towards its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. So the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but hardly cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at the moment. The horde keeper went into a spasm and spouted deadly flames. When he felt the stroke, battle fire billowed and spewed. Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Ecgtheow, it was no easy thing to have to give ground like that and go, unwillingly to inhabit another home in a place beyond. So every man must yield the leasehold of his days. Before long, the fierce contenders clashed again. The horde guard took heart, inhaled and swelled up, and got a new wind. He who had once ruled was furled in fire and had to face the worst. No help or backing was to be had then from his high-born comrades. That hand-picked troop broke ranks and ran for their lives to the safety of the wood. But within one heart sorrow welled up. In a man of worth, the claims of kinship cannot be denied. His name was Wiglaf, son of Weohstan's, a well-regarded Shilfing warrior related to Alfheir. When he saw his lord tormented by the heat of his scalding helmet, he remembered the bountiful gifts he bestowed on him, how well he lived among the Wagamundings, the freehold he inherited from his father before him. He could not hold back. One hand brandished the yellow-timbered shield, the other drew his sword. An ancient blade that was said to have belonged to Enmund, son of Othir, the one Weohstan had slain when he was in exile without friends. He carried the arms to the victim's kinfolk. The burnished helmet, the webbed chainmail, and that relic of the giants. But Onelia retuned the weapons to him, rewarded Weohstan with Edmund's war gear. He ignored the blood feud, the fact that Edmund was his brother's son. Weohstan kept that war gear for a lifetime, the sword and the mail shirt, until it was the son's turn to follow his father and perform his part. Then, in old age, at the end of his days, among the Weathergeats, he bequeathed to Wiglaf innumerable weapons. And now the youth was to enter the line of battle with his lord, his first time to be tested as a fighter. His spirit did not break, and the ancestral blade would keep its edge, as the dragon discovered, as soon as they came together in combat. Sad at heart, addressing his companions, Wiglaf spoke wise and fluent words. I remember that time when the mead was flowing, how we pledged loyalty to our lord in the hall, promised our ring-giver we would be worth our price. Make good the gift of the war gear, those swords and helmets, as and when his need required it. He picked us out from the army deliberately, honored us and judged us fit for this action, made me these lavish gifts, and all because he considered us the best of his arm-bearing thanes. And now, although he wanted this challenge to be the one he'd face by himself alone, the shepherd of our land, a man unequaled in the quest for glory, and a name for daring, now the day has come when this Lord we serve needs sound men to give him their support. Let us go to him, help our leader through the hot flame and dread of the fire. As God is my witness, I would rather my body were robbed in the same burning blaze as my gold giver's body, than go back home bearing arms. That is unthinkable, unless we have first slain the foe and defended the life of the prince of the Weathergeats. I well know that things he has done for us deserve better. Should he alone be left exposed to fall in battle, we must bond together, shield and helmet, mail, shirt, and sword. Then he wadded the dangerous reek and went under arms to his lord, saying only, "Go on, dear Beowulf, do everything you said you would when you were still young, and vowed you would never let your name and fame be dimmed while you lived. Your deeds are famous, so stay resolute, my lord. Defend your life now, while the whole of your strength I shall stand by you." After those words, a wilderness rose in the dragon again, a wildness rose in the dragon again, and drove it to attack, heaving up fire, hunting for enemies, the humans it loathed. Flames lapped the shield, charred it to the boss, and the body armor on the young warrior was useless to him. But Wiglaf did well under the wide rim Beowulf shared with him, once his own had shattered in sparks and ashes. Inspired again by the thought of glory, the war king threw his whole strength behind a sword stroke and connected with the skull, and Nagling snapped Beowulf's ancient iron-gray sword let him down in the fight. It was never his fortune to be helped in combat by the cutting edge of weapons made of iron. When he yielded a sword, no matter how bloodied and hard-edged the blade, his hand was too strong. The stroke he dealt, I have heard, would ruin it. He could reap no advantage. Then the bane of that people, the fire-breathing dragon, was mad to attack for a third time. When a chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. Next thing they say, the noble son of Weohstan saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He left the head alone, but his fighting hand was burned when he came to his kinsman's aid. He lunged at the enemy lower down, so that his decorated sword sank into its belly, and the flames grew weaker. Once again the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. He struck it deep into the dragon's flank. Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound. They had killed the enemy. Courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. So every man should act. Be at hand when needed. But now, for the king, this would be the last of his many labors and triumphs in the world. Then the wound, dealt by the ground burner earlier, began to scald and swell. Beowulf discovered deadly poison suppurating inside him, surges of nausea, and so, in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and struggled towards a seat on the rampart. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns, and now that Thane, unequaled for goodness, with his own hands, washed his lord's wounds, swabbed the weary prince with water, bathed him in clean, unbuckled his helmet. Beowulf spoke, in spite of his wounds, mortal wounds. He still spoke, for he well knew his days in the world had been lived out to the end. His allotted time was drawing to a close. Death was very near. Now is the time when I would have wanted to bestow this armor on my own son, had it been my fortune to have fathered an heir, and live on in this flesh. For 50 years I ruled this nation. No king of any neighboring clan would dare face me with troops. None had the power to intimidate me. I took what came, cared for, and stood by things in my keeping. Never fomented quarrels, never swore to a lie. All this consoles me, doomed as I am, and sickening for death. Because of my right way, the ruler of mankind need never blame me when the breath leaves my body for murder of kinsmen. Go now quickly, dearest Wiglaf, under the grey stone, where the dragon is laid out, lost to his treasure. Hurry to feast your eyes on the hoard. Away you go. I want to examine that ancient gold, gaze my fill on those garnered jewels. My going will be easier, for having seen the treasure, a less troubled letting go of the life and lordship I have long maintained. And so I have heard the son of Weohstan quickly obeyed the command of his languishing war-weary lord. He went in his chainmail under the rock-piled roof of the barrow, exulting in his triumph, and saw beyond the seat a treasure trove of astonishing richness, wall hangings that were a wonder to behold, glittering gold spread across the ground, the old dawn-scorching serpent's den, packed with goblets and vessels of the past, tarnished and corroding, rusty helmets all eaten away, armbands everywhere, artfully wrought. How easily treasure buried in the ground, gold hidden, however skillfully, can escape from any man. And he saw, too, a standard entirely of gold, hanging high over the hoard, a masterpiece of filigree. It glowed with light, so he could make out the ground at his feet and inspect the valuables. Of the dragon there was no remaining sign. The sword had dispatched him. Then, the story goes, a certain man plundered the hoard in the immemorial home, filled his arms with flagons and plates, anything he wanted, and took the standard also, most brilliant of banners. Already the blade of the old king's sharp killing sword had done its worst. The one who had for long minded the horde, hovering over gold, unleashing fire, surging forth midnight after midnight, had been mowed down.